Hello, everyone. I now call this meeting of the Urban Design Commission to order. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, MGL 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15th, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, as well as Mayor Curtatoni's declaration of emergency dated March 15th, 2020, this meeting of the Urban Design Commission is conducted via remote participation. We will make recordings available upon request as soon as possible after the meeting. My name is Dan Bartman, and I have been designated by Planning Director Lewis as the co-chair for tonight's meeting in her place. We will start with a roll call of the other commission members present. Luisa Oliveira.
Here.
Frank Valdez.
Here.
Deborah Fennick.
Present.
And Andrew Arbaugh.
Present.
Our first matter of business is the approval of meeting minutes from October 13th and October 27th, 2020, which are not yet finished because the meeting was moved one day earlier to Monday. So I will have those available at the next meeting, and we will table that matter for the time being, which brings us to our first design review for 371 Highland Avenue, a 4-story general building in the MR4 district, which was continued from October 27th, and presenting tonight is Will from Kelsa Design. Will, you can take it from here. I'm going to make you presenter.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you see that? Yep. Okay.
Yep.
Great.
All good.
Thank you, everyone. So my name again is Will Chalfant from Kelsa Design. So I'm glad Dan's here because this is the first of its kind here as far as some of the new regulations regarding buildings exceeding 100 feet in length. And I know sort of the last one was really a well, let's just throw something at the wall and see what we can get for responses. And I appreciated all the input on that. Some of the comments that I heard were obviously we were missing a landscape plan, which has now been included in this package. Also that, while the two buildings that I was proposing were clearly reading separately, they didn't relate to each other in any sort of grand sense. And, we kind of had a very traditional building on one end and more of a contemporary version on the other. Again, we had a neighborhood meeting where the neighborhood was, in general, really more receptive to a contemporary aesthetic. The client wanted a more traditional, but we've sort of gone back towards a contemporary overall vision for the project. And I will just, I'll go through these changes and I know everyone's time is valuable. So first off is the landscape plan. So one thing I want to point out is this section of West Street, these are existing trees to remain. Our intention is to maintain those as is. They're nice trees. They've done well, and we, obviously we'll have to protect them during construction, but the intention is to maintain those as much as possible. We have this strip along this side here, which we are intending to heavily vegetate. I'll let Andrew review the details of that. But the intention is for these to be very hardy plants that can also double as snow storage locations. And then in the rear, we've got a lot of permeable pavers. That is going to be more of a back of house space, maybe overflow bike parking, things of that nature, as well as egress from the garage. But I think the important thing to point out here on this plan is we're adding these 4 new street trees, excuse me, as well as this brick strip here with plantings in between. So the idea is to really sort of enliven this stretch of Highland, which has for the longest time been just one massive curb cut for the garage, and bring it back to a pedestrian friendly environment. So one item that had been brought up was this garage entry and whether or not we needed it, whether or not how to treat that aesthetically, so on. So I spoke with the client. For right now, they'd really like to maintain this underground parking. They think it's going to be helpful for the longevity of the building financially long term. And so for right now, we are showing that as is. But I will, and so, you know, I don't want to repeat myself, but just quickly going over the plans, the underground parking level, we've got space for 13 spaces. We're handling all of our mechanical equipment down there. On the upper level, we've got a bike room directly off the front here, which has direct access out the vestibule. Trash is being handled in the rear, and we've sort of created an internal level area to come out here through a man door and adjacent to the garage. And again, the commercial space is taking up the majority of this first floor level, other than the program elements of elevators and stairs and so on. The units, we haven't revised anything there. And just a reminder that, again, we are calling for a completely green roof on the rooftop. I will have a landscape plan for this as well, which will outline some of the proposed plantings going up there. But the majority of it is intended to be not accessible by the public in the sense that they're not going to be able to walk around on it, but it can be maintained. And we are discussing provisions for small areas for sort of community garden areas for vegetable gardens and things like that. But I'll get into that when we have that plan handy. So again, this is what we showed you last time, which obviously is a mishmash of many things going on. And one of the comments that I think was, you know, very well merited was that, you know, this building has sort of had split personality. It had many different things going on depending on the side of the building you were standing on. And so we decided that, you know, originally we treated this rear with more traditional materials that are found in a lot of Somerville clapboard panels, divided light windows relating to the triple deckers and such, sort of on the other side of the industrial zone behind this building. But we decided that really the whole building should have a rich aesthetic to it. And so, opposed to the you know, party in the front and business in the back, we've kind of maintained the design around the exterior. So program-wise didn't change, but then what we've done is tried to take a traditional material palette, at least for the, I'm going to focus on the left-hand side first, if that works for everyone. So a simplified geometry really with masonry, more contemporary style windows, hopper style, but also some detailing within this to give some texture to the facade as well as some interest level. The whole corner is kind of capped by this more contemporary cornice, which reads as a sort of framing this corner of the building with this reveal here. And that also doubles as a way of breaking the two buildings up. But so we're showing a Flemish bond in between some of these windows, as well as a strip here along the top and at the bottom above the sign band. So we've simplified really the materials, the geometry. We got rid of those odd bays on the side with the you know, PVC paneling and all of that. And we've tried to do a more contemporary building that is very understandable to read, I think, from the general public. And then, so we've got some perspectives here, sort of showing it in its context. We've got the existing trees on the left-hand side. Unfortunately, this was taken at a time when there wasn't a tremendous amount of foliage, but I assure you that they're a little bushier than that. But again, we have our new street trees, and this kind of shows this break between the two buildings, where the right one is clearly, you know, I use the term loosely, but a different building. However, they're all interconnected with this ground level glazing, and that was part of the way that we hid the garage doors. We wanted to use a glass door that had some divisions to it that sort of at first glance when passing by could read as a storefront, sort of continue that aesthetic along the bottom. Obviously, those we'd like to frost those panels so that we're not seeing headlights and that you couldn't see the potential trash can sitting behind there. And we've also recessed it about 3 feet so as not to encroach on the pedestrian environment along the street. So the right building, we've kind of taken a few comments was that this corner on the right-hand side here was almost being ignored a little bit because it is going to be one of the first things you see when coming down Highland, entering into Davis Square. So we thought instead of making it an afterthought, it should really be almost a focal point. So we are taking a more contemporary approach here with large floor-to-ceiling windows, and then sort of this deconstruction, as it were, of the brick away from some of these paneled areas. And we're carrying through this sort of picture framing of what we're doing on the left-hand side with this large, I don't want to call it a bay because it's actually coplanar with what's below it, but the framing of it sort of protrudes out, creating those shadow lines. So we did a few different color options here. This is more of a muted sort of, traditional brick colors, intending to use panel in these gray areas. And here's a night perspective coming from Davis Square down, showing the two, as I mentioned, traditional sort of brick colors. And this can kind of give you a better idea of that framing here of this corner element that I talked about. In reality, as I showed in the other, these trees may be a little bushier, but for purposes of the presentation, I wanted the building to read right there. So then we did another version, just kind of to show how this could really read as two separate buildings by doing some very contrasting colors. The materials remain the same, but the colors are different. Again, this is all masonry, but sort of a different color palette to really drive home the fact that these are two separate buildings and to avoid that concern of a large massing along the street. And then again, a similar view here with the second color option. So just in flat elevation form, again, just sort of highlighting this, we've created this separation. I know Dan would prefer these two bricks kiss, but I thought that from a design standpoint, I liked how this carried around and returned on the other side. We've sort of designated this entry as a highlight of this ground level here, whereas the left-hand side is very clearly related to the commercial space in that corner of the building. And then on the back side, we've carried around that same partie and maintained this separation, but so it is reading as two buildings, but the aesthetic of what's going on along Highland is carried around to the backside. So with that, I think I'll open it up to comments, questions.
I can start with questions. It's easy. So just on the landscape plan, it says that the first pair is an empty tree pit. Is that correct? I'm just trying to, going off Google, it looks like they're all there, but I know that's not necessarily the case.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part? It cut out a little bit.
Yeah, sorry. On the landscape plan, you're showing a replacement pair closest to the intersection of West and Highland, that it's an empty pit. The Google Earth makes it look like there's still a tree there, so I just wanted to just confirm that that was the case.
Yeah, there's still a tree there. I think when I was talking to Blair about this, Blair Hines, he felt that there's a decent chance that corner one may get nicked during construction, and so we'd want to replace in kind with what's there. I believe that's his thinking, but I can verify that.
Okay, if that tree is there and it is preservable, that would be preferable. And then the rear area, you mentioned that is permeable pavers as well. I just wanted to verify that.
Yes, yes.
Sorry, it's Louisa. I can't somehow get my camera to work. If that tree is a public tree and it is taken down, you'll have to go through a tree hearing as well. So that's important to note.
Yeah, I believe West Street is a private way, so it's actually not a tree, a city tree.
It's not a city tree, but then you'll have to go through the tree preservation ordinance because there is an ordinance on private trees now as well.
Happy to do so.
It's a super fun process. And then I think just a little bit more information on the size of the tree pits that are being proposed. And I believe in your last plan that you guys had, you'd shown that the sidewalk itself was 12 feet, which I think is the requirement. It would be good just to verify that again,
Sure.
the setback.
Yep. Right, because this is in a pedestrian zone. So I will verify that with the dimensions so that that's clear. As far as the pits go, I mean, I believe that, you know, the intention is obviously to maintain the standards that the city has for new street trees. But we thought this could be a nice opportunity to kind of go above and beyond that with the brick pavers and the intermittent planting beds around the trees. But obviously maintaining accessibility is paramount.
So a question regarding the facades. Are you offering two alternatives? Is that the idea here?
Well,
You have
Well,
a
I
light brick and a dark brick. I mean,
yeah,
there's
I kind of,
material choice, not
Sorry,
really
sorry.
design option, but material option, materiality option.
yeah, I did the first one with what as on the screen now, and I thought it looked good, but I kind of wanted to take it a step further as far as this idea of these really reading differently. And that's why I introduced the other brick. I mean, it's not a brick color you see a lot in Somerville. I know some of the newer buildings at Assembly Row have some of those colors, but in general, it's not. I just thought it was a little different, and I kind of want to get just throw it at the board, see what you thought.
So
That's
I'm
a question. The gray band that goes to the top and comes down, yeah, what is that?
What is this material? Was that the question, Frank? I'm sorry.
Yes.
That I envisioned that as being a metal panel that I could avoid having I could get as long as I could without having a seam. So it would sort of have a little bit of reflectivity to it and draw attention to it. But I don't know if it's something beyond. I mean, it wouldn't be brake metal, but in that vein of material, but something that wouldn't oil can or dent if it wasn't installed properly. I do need to get a little more information on what exactly that would be, but that was my thinking, opposed to a panel.
So I'd like to talk about a couple of things. I'm a little ambivalent about the two different bricks. I think either scenario, depending on the actual selections, could be okay. I feel like that gap that you're talking about right now would be much more interesting as a very narrow gap that is shadowed, that sort of separates those two buildings as opposed to that much surface, which in my mind starts to unify the building here. And also, I just think it's just not as interesting as if it were a deep recess shadow, and set up these those two parts as opposed to something that has that much surface to it. So that was one suggestion. I have to say that I definitely like the garage door. I feel like that's a much friendlier thing for the street than to walk by.
Yeah.
Open, and I really appreciate that. I'm on the right side. I'm having a lot of trouble understanding the tectonics of the brick wall. Right now, it looks to me like just a what is it, foam core cutout. I'm looking at the light version on my other computer right now. So foam core cutout. It just doesn't. Tectonically, it's just not. I think reading very well. It looks, I think it's falling apart too much, that surface. And it is, and I think the fact that the cornice, that it's almost like you took the top off of it in the middle, where it separates that much. So it makes it even more cutout-ish. That return is only a foot thick. There's nothing credible about that facade holding together. So I think you really need to look at the tectonics. I think it would be much more successful if there was more either a complete frame that had an integrity to it. I think it's broken up is just, isn't working right now, and I could see it creating vertical frames that had, frames that gave it some verticality. Little portions you might add one more of them. And then that dark panel is just a recess. It gives, it's like a inverse bay window or something. Could be interesting as a bay window, but,
well, it would also sort of signify the entrance way as well, because it could be a good opportunity to get some verticality to your point there. And
yeah. So I think, so I think in the corner piece, I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling about it. I do feel like this would be much more interesting if that frame had more integrity to it.
Okay.
Yeah. And the cornice had more uniformity on the right side, had more uniformity also. I think, you were talking about how to break up the storefront, the ground floor, and I think that's working. It's the storefront's more transparent. It's, I think it reads as a storefront, public space. And this is just a curiosity. I'm wondering if you can see into the bike storage area, or whether that's also.
Well, I prefer to frost that because bike rooms are usually pretty messy. So I think at minimum, maybe frost the lower panels and keep the top transparent. But I agree that you shouldn't really look in there.
Fitness room?
The fitness room is on the rear.
So I think it'd be easier to bring a bike right into the fitness room if that were where the bike room were located.
You're saying swap the fitness and the bike? Well, the only reason I didn't do that is the potential. I mean, I guess it would be a flooring decision choice, but just people driving a dirty bike through the main lobby into the back. But I could certainly look at that. I mean, I'm not sure people want
a door directly off of that alley, so you could just come in off the alley and go straight into the bike room, as opposed to bringing it into any other space at all.
Yeah. So the issue with that is that there is a grade change from this property to the West Street. There's like a parking area in the rear of West, at the end of that alley. It's sort of on the if you come down West and then jog to the right, that's where it is. And there's like a 3.5-foot grade change there. It's built up with like railroad ties and things. So we would have to create a ramp to accommodate that for the bikes. Because that was our original intention, was to have it brought in the rear. But then by the time we got done with the ramp, we lost a lot of that area. But we could certainly take a look at doing that. I mean, I hesitate to get rid of any of the green space on the right-hand side for an access point, but maybe, maybe it's just a matter of kind of working the trash space and all that differently, so that maybe that man door adjacent to the garage door is the way you can access the bike room.
That would be better. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, the bike room location was really kind of driven from, a lot of projects in Boston and Cambridge. They want that front and center so that you can really come right off the street in there, which I agree with, but it isn't necessarily the most beautiful thing.
I think it's heading in the right direction. I think it's leaps from last time. I don't like the option 2 with the light, the scenes of that. That was pointing out. I do kind of. I think that
Frank, I can't really hear you. I'm not sure if it's. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm in a concrete box. So there's a lot of echo. I apologize. Can you hear me now?
Something is wrong. Something is wrong. It sounds like you're in a chamber. Maybe it's mute.
Do you happen to have headphones, Frank?
You have headphones, Frank? Or?
Does it work with headphones, you think? Is it better now?
A little bit.
A little bit.
Is it better if I get closer, or is it better if I get further?
It's kind of horrible either way, honestly.
I didn't want to say that.
Well, there's nothing I can do about it. You know, I can't move anywhere else.
Can everybody else
So-
try to mute? Does that help?
Frank, the slower you go, it seems like it comes through a little bit easier. I'm not saying one word at a time, but
Is it better if I speak like this? Much better? I'll keep it short. I think it's heading in the right direction. I don't like the white option. I do like the option that's on the screen. I think that it's really taking some of the language from the zoning and beginning to translate it well. The one thing I would suggest maybe is the band, with a metal band. Could it be explored as well as brick, like a green brick? You know, with a different coursing, so it maintains a little elegance, and instead of introducing metal, but potentially, as you say, made or can, a different coursing of a dark gray brick that is also recessed might give you a texture that is interesting enough and still maintains kind of that language. There's a really interesting building by David Hassim in the Seaport, a housing, by the fire station right above where all the restaurants are, you know,
I know the building.
there's a historical part and there's a new part, and he uses the brick and he just shook his colors and recesses, and it looks very elegant. I think that could be an opportunity for you there. And I don't know how everybody else feels about the finger that doesn't finish going the other way. I'm undecided about that.
Those are driving me nuts a little bit. It's just sort of like the band that gave up.
Okay. That's fair. I mean, that's why we're here. I think we'll lose those. I think that center section needs to be explored a little bit more. As far as this band goes, I really like the idea of doing that in a brick. One thing that I kind of had in the back of my mind, which I didn't want to bring up to the board because sometimes it could be a really interesting opportunity to light it and sort of have well, not a marquee, but a hidden line that sort of highlights and that glows that corner. But you know, I realize that this is a pretty residential neighborhood around it, and I don't want to go too far there. But I do like the idea of doing it in a contrasting brick color, Frank.
So I can jump in too. I think when I first saw this elevation, I kind of didn't really understand what was happening with that metal panel. I think when we saw it with the corner and you saw it turn the corner, that made more sense to me. And I think that elevation kind of made it make more sense to me, and it made the C shape on the contemporary half of the building. I was sort of reading that as something that felt like it was somewhat in dialogue with it on that portion of the building, just in terms of a framing element.
Mm-hmm.
I think I agree with Deborah, and what I hear of Frank. I think that the more, I guess what we'll call the more contemporary version, I think Deborah's comments about the tectonic, I totally agree with that. Like, it's hard to figure out the logic as to what's happening where on that portion of the building. And I think it could be just sort of simplified to some degree. And if that C element is staying, that seems like it should be something that reads as really special and sort of pops off and feels unique. And right now I feel like with all that's going on that side of the building, that it's a little harder to read it as such.
I think I'd like to get your opinion on that. Do you think these cornices here, I almost feel like these don't relate very well to anything going on in the building. I almost want to lose those. But I didn't want to kind of flatten that side. But that was one thought and maybe with the introduction of another frame or something that maybe pierces that top cornice and maintains some sort of chain. I don't know. They seem sort of unrelated to anything else going on, I guess, the more I look at it.
The architects can jump in, but for me, like, it's the fact that it's like 4 different volumes on that piece. Like, if the 3 went together as one thing, I could maybe see that cornice could work. Or just sort of, I feel like it's less to do with whatever the thing is, to just that there's too many of them. I'd rather see sort of one volume instead of one volume, little volume, little volume, little volume, little volume.
Got it.
That's the landscape architect's version of tectonics. That's the very technical terms.
I agree with that, Andrew. And I think that C thing could get a little more vertical too. Maybe it captures the ground. I don't know. It's too regular. It's too, well, I think once you do it, and Andrew was saying, you know, there's more surface to this, then you'll find a way to, I think, to have it sit, you know, have it contribute to the facade better. Do you have a view from that corner? From the into David Square approach? Because it's, you know, it's a corner element, right?
Yeah. Let me try to pull that up while we're talking. So Dan, I don't know if you could chime in on, Dan and I had a discussion about this piece, this vertical piece that broke the 2. He would like me to lose it. So it sounds like there's a little bit of agreement here with the board, or at least to treat it differently. But I know, Deborah, you'd mentioned, you know, shrinking it to make it almost read as a, you know, a dado. But I don't know, you know, Dan, I defer to you on some of these zoning requirements and if we're really meeting them or not.
As well as a non-voting member, I would add from the staff's opinion that you've made a really good faith effort at achieving the appearance of 2 buildings standard, which is complex to begin with. Right? It's hard to do, but is intended to reflect the existing character of narrower buildings in the MR districts. Generally, we think that the traditional response of contemporary design is to just put a notch in the middle of a building if you're trying to make it appear as 2 masses. But that if you review existing main streets, that's not actually the characteristic that differentiates one building from another. So I don't think you've gone to that extent here. Your focus was to frame the corner element and from a, you know, view standpoint from down the street. So I don't think you've undermined any of the goals just because that's there. And I think Frank and Deborah's feedback kind of goes hand in hand. She suggested narrowing it, and Frank talked about, I believe, using brick potentially using brick instead of a metal panel, which I think those things all go hand in hand with that goal.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it'd be better if it was brick and it was deep, you know, and it just, you know, it became mysterious what the material was, but metal panel surface, I think, is not working. Yeah.
Especially at grade, we know how that's going to last, so that's a good point.
Were you able to find anything from that other vantage point?
Yeah, I'm not technologically right this second is not a good time for me, so I'm happy to present it to the board either at the next time or supplementing today's meeting. But I'm working off 2 computers, unfortunately, simultaneously. So
if I might make a suggestion, if it's not out of turn for me to do so, that one of the things is, if a design guideline is important, we can identify, you know, the voting membership can identify it as such. And there is one about having at terminated vistas, buildings should be articulated with design features that function as focal points. And I think I hear the rest of the commission members identifying that you have 2 corners that are focal points. And so if I might suggest that one, if everybody else saw fit, and then that would highlight that one for the planning board when you eventually get there to pay specific attention to those design elements.
yeah, one thing that I think was actually I think it was my fault for saying it last time, but that corner is actually not the corner of Whipple and Highland. There's another building there, which sort of takes away from the specialness of it being on the corner. But I only mention that because down the line that neighboring lot could get redeveloped, and that could change how that's perceived. But as for right now, it's, a single-story building. But I wanted to kind of clear that up because I think last time maybe I expressed that was on the corner of Whipple, and it's not. But yeah, Dan, which was there a number for that to this is just so I can reference it?
Well, so the others would have to agree and decide that one is a priority design guideline outside of me stating it, but it is F in the design guidelines of section 12 for the MR district.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm not sure it is. There's, there are buildings. I'd have to see the street elevation, but there are buildings along on the outside of Davis Square side. So, and as you say, Will, it's future development and all that, that corner may go away. And I don't think the corner, the left side corner, is really a terminating. I don't think it's one of those vertical elements. It's just, I think if the building is turning well, and it's exposed, so you have sort of two facades really, but I don't think it's, punctuating a vista or anything like that. So.
Can you see that Google Earth, or is that?
Yep. Okay,
so here's Whipple. This is the lot that I was saying is not part of our project, and then we start right here. I'm sorry, we start here in this fence. So this whole section is staying as it is for now. So right now there is an opportunity for quite a nice sort of corner here, but I just wanted to have the caveat that it's may not be that way forever.
Is that also an MR4 next door to it?
That is correct.
Yeah.
So that's a party wall.
There's a landscape buffer in the proposed.
Yeah, we are providing a gap there.
Like 5 feet.
Yeah.
How much? Oh, okay. How much of a gap is that?
It varies actually because the lot tapers, but
yeah, it's widest at the street. I see it.
Yeah, and at its narrowest point, it is.
Looks like 5 on your
5 feet. Yeah, so it goes from 5 to probably, let's call it 7 at the street.
So can
enough to get some glazing in there.
It's what?
No, enough to put glazing on that side of the wall without needing exterior head sprinklers. So.
Yeah, fire protection. Yeah. Well, that's yeah.
Yeah, I really yes. If something got put right there, it's gonna. Yeah, I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that's I think maybe a corner element there doesn't make a lot of sense. Your visor there, your C visor is gonna take up half the space. If it's, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure we're overhanging too much. Let me just go to elevation. Yeah, I mean, there's a foot or so. Yeah, I mean, your point's well taken. It's a lot of it's gonna get lost if something gets built directly next door.
Yeah.
Like those trees.
Any other general feedback? No? Okay, so if I'm correct, I wasn't at the last meeting, but it appears that a preferred schematic design was chosen and you advanced this one for further comment. Frank's shaking his head yes. Okay. Which means the outstanding requirements are to designate any priority design guidelines if there are any, and deem if the design guidelines have been satisfied, which can be done holistically or individually. If any have not been satisfied, the requirement is to recommend modifications. And that is all that's required. So that the minimum necessary vote would be if the design guidelines have been satisfied. That would also involve saying that there are no priorities specifically, which are not required.
Dan, tell us what
Oh, so we
motion
would
we
need
have to
we
make
would need a
to move
we would need
forward.
we would need a motion to from any of the voting membership to one, designate any priority design guidelines, and then separately a motion to deem that the design guidelines have been satisfied.
And that has to be Deborah, Andrew, or Frank.
That is correct. Deborah, it looked like you said something, but your mic was muted. Oh, and you just froze. Did you say something again?
Nope.
Nope. Okay. So do we have a motion for either of those?
I believe that the priorities of the guidelines have been met. So I'm a motion for that.
Okay, a motion to deem that all the design guidelines have been satisfied. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Deborah
That-
seconds.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that we can't have the applicant come back with.
Yeah, that's I guess my question is like, I feel like guidelines have been met, but from a purely strictly zoning standpoint, like the boxes have been checked, but from an aesthetic point of view, like I don't feel like we're at a point where I would want to push it on.
Yeah.
So
Agree.
the primary objective is to provide them with a recommendation for further development. But if you would like to see your feedback incorporated, and you can ask to see it again. This would, just keep in mind, this would be the third visit, and understandable because this is the first one of these buildings pulling the appearance of two. And the smallest version of one of these also. We did have another case where it was a much larger building. So it's probably more complex to pull off with a smaller one, but that is up to the commission.
I think that would be my preference, would be to see the changes incorporated before we sort of thumbs up it to the next level, because it wasn't a small amount of items that we were looking at.
Yeah, and they will meet, the design, if it should be brought up to reflect, to meet these the spirit of these guidelines more, I think, more sufficiently.
So Deborah, the answer to your question is that would not preclude, if the design in general, even
Mhm.
without these changes, still meets the design guidelines, you can take that vote. And then otherwise you would motion to continue until the next scheduled meeting, which is December 8th.
Okay. Okay, so I'll hold on to my second then.
All right, so we'll take a roll call vote on the motion that all of the design guidelines are satisfied by the reflected design. Frank Valdez,
Yes, a motion.
Deborah Fennick,
Yes.
and Andrew Arbaugh. You were muted.
So if I say yes, we're still motioning to continue though, right?
Yep.
Okay.
The one technical thing, Dan, did someone
Go ahead.
second that motion? I think,
Yep. Deborah had seconded it.
okay. She said I take my second back, so I didn't know if you meant that. But I think she meant it for something else. So now we need another motion saying that we want them to come back.
Correct.
Okay, so
All right, on the motion to continue the case until December 8th, Frank?
A motion.
Deborah? Oh, sorry.
Yes.
Seconded. Frank, yay. Deborah, yay. And Andrew?
Yay.
All right, we'll see you again on December 8th, incorporating this feedback.
Great.
And then pending that meeting, I believe all of the boxes have been checked, technically speaking.
Okay, great.
All right.
And I assume as standard, I need to get that all to you at least a week in advance of the 8th meeting, correct?
That would be ideal. The board has, or the commission has requested to see this 7 days in advance. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I appreciate the feedback.
Well, thank you, Will, and thank you for educating us as well and helping us in that process.
I wish I heard any of that, Frank. I'm sorry.
All right. Thanks, Will.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Our next design review is 494 Medford Street, and I will promote James. James, are you there with us?
Yeah, I am. Let me see.
Does anyone else need promoted for presentation?
I'm sorry?
Do I need to promote anyone else to present?
No.
Just you? Okay.
So, good evening. James Rissling with LR Designs, Cambridge, Massachusetts. And I guess tonight we're following up with review of 494 Medford Street, which is also a general building in MR4. So should I just proceed to share, Dan? Oh.
Yep. Should be working.
Okay. So I'm not as familiar with your format here. So do you see my PDFs?
We do.
Okay. Let me see if I can just, I like to minimize us. Okay. So at the last hearing, we presented our package here with 3 options. And no, they're not in here. Okay. I'll start with the new package. While I dig out the other one on the previous screen. So we've developed more of the site. We show the 2 street trees, some bicycle parking. We've defined our raised planter here at the edge of the building. Some grade planting between these 2 doors. An areaway that allows some light to the basement area. We are pretty much filling the site with the building, as this is almost a party wall condition on this property line. And this is the revised parking, or the proposed parking area, 2 spaces under for the residents. We were asked to pursue, I'll pull up the color images because that might bring it back to memory. This sort of darker, more contemporary take on the 3 or almost 4 options we had last time. And this is placed in the context of the neighborhood with Google Earth. And the photo montages, I feel we may be a little out of scale, which is unfortunate. I have also included views of the model in our packet, Troll Street and Medford Street elevation respectively. And then we've also put them in the previous massing model that we had presented, that just a few views in that massing model. And if I go back, we have, go this way. We've taken a look at all the elevations with this scheme in mind. The base of the building we've now show as more a series of brick piers that define the structural bays of the building. And then you have different events in these sort of axes within the bays. This would be a screen or a rain screen that encloses the parking area or garage area. The entrance to the 2 apartments, entrance to the commercial space, commercial glazing, and then the primary commercial elevation on Medford Street, which is here. So this is the Medford elevation with the Charles Street foreshortened. And then this is the rear elevation that abuts the residential zone. And then this is the our party wall elevation. I wouldn't mind pulling up. I guess what I'd like to do is I'll pull up the previous team that we looked at that has a colored elevation so we can compare it. And then I guess open it for comments. I'm sorry. I mean, I guess if we could start the comments, I'll just pull this up as a refresher.
Can start on the site plan. I actually just had a question for Dan on this one, probably. Reading through the zoning, it seems like that the building setback needs to accommodate a 12-foot public sidewalk on Medford Street. Just sort of measuring this one out, it doesn't look like that corner accomplishes that. Is that noted, or is this an exclusion to that?
That is true in the MR districts. I haven't reviewed these plans myself, though.
Okay. When I scaled the Medford Street one to the entry, it looked like it was only about 10.5 feet. So it was shy of what was required.
Yeah, I think it will be shy. And in fact, the existing building is at the back of the sidewalk currently. So we're improving the width. And I believe, though, we're also, sorry about that. I believe we would also be eventually in line with the existing buildings. And I don't know if that's a consideration with that 12-foot requirement, is if there's a street line existing, would it be better to match that?
So there's not a mechanism in the zoning ordinance that matches the front setbacks of neighboring structures in the MR districts, but all new buildings are to adjust their front setbacks if the sidewalk's not already 12 feet. I don't know what this one is measured at. The one potential remedy is a variance from that requirement, which you are entitled to pursue if necessary. I won't speculate about the conditions of the lot that might make that a possibility or not here, but if there are specifics of the lot shape or underground materials or things like that, characteristics of the lot that make this lot different from the others in the same district, it opens the door for a potential variance from that issue. But generally speaking, every MR property is asked to set back a little bit to make the sidewalk up to 12 feet in total width, which is from the outside edge of the curb to the face of the facade of the building. And then any lot area that's used to accomplish that just gets paved as if it's concrete, or whatever sidewalk treatment is similar in front of the building.
So that was,
All
I
right.
guess, one question. The other question was, I really appreciate that. So these are new street trees that are going in on Charles Street as well. Is that correct?
That's yes, to the extent it's feasible, yes.
Okay. And that was, I guess, maybe a question for probably Louisa in that case. The sidewalk there is 6.5 feet. When I measured out, it looks like the tree pits were about 2.5 feet, which seems below the city standard. I don't know if the city has leniency for, or a different standard for side streets, or if they would put them in there anyway, because it's Somerville and we're trying to jam as many trees in there as possible. But
No, there is a minimum sidewalk, tree pit width and length and width.
Okay.
And you're right, it is, I think it starts at 3 feet.
Okay.
Just one piece of context, the tree planting requirements in the zoning are for new streets built by large scale redevelopment. And so Louise's office and the engineering division end up weighing in on the exact treatment of public, it changes the public sidewalks.
Yep. Okay. And then I guess the other concerns I have just on the site plan, the planters that are shown on the Charles Street side, they're only about, it looks like 2 feet wide, and one of them is being called a light well too. So I guess I'm kind of curious how that would work if we have about a foot for the wall itself. We really only have a foot gap in order to let the light in. I guess I'm questioning the effectiveness of that. And sort of similarly, the ability to really grow plants in a plant bed that is that tight.
Right, okay, no, I understand that.
Kind of, actually sort of similar sort of questioning about the north property line, or the planned north property line too. What that actually is, and in some places it looks like it narrows down to like 18 inches between the property line, and I'm kind of wondering if the adjacent lot gets built also at an MR4, does this space become, you know, almost inaccessible to potentially creepy when it opens up, and if there's a possibility of just running the building parallel to the lot line instead of creating these sort of little kind of nothing spaces on the north side.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it sort of responds to the interior program with the desire to get off the property line enough to have some openings. But again, what would the value of those openings be if the next MR4 was built?
And even if it's not, I'm assuming there's a fence or something, that they're basically inaccessible. Yeah, they're basically inaccessible. And then is this, so the driveway area is this a repaving of an existing parking area? Is that correct?
Yes, yes. Yeah. The existing paving, this is basically the existing paving here with some green here that's at the back edge of the lot, and then at the front here.
So I guess I would encourage you to find a way to get that green back on that edge too. I think paving right up to the property line is not advisable. I think we see a lot in Somerville where that condition causes runoff that ends up in other properties and can do a lot of damage to other properties. So giving some amount of buffer, I think, would be really advisable. Even if you're switching to permeable pavers along that edge, or switching to grass, especially on the portion that looks like it's really just intended to be reversing area. I don't know that, I don't know that we need that paved the way that it's paved for garage entry at all.
Yeah, I agree with that. Andrew, I was gonna comment on that. It feels like more pavement than you really need. And every bit of non-pavement is an improvement.
This lot has, I mean, there's an easement here that we presume is for access to the lot between us and the next commercial lot. So that's why we elected to pull the paving all the way to the edge. But that's fine. That's the reason it was taken to the property line, was to accommodate this 8-foot easement across the back of the lot.
Grass pavers could still accomplish that too.
Grass
Yep.
pavers, is that what you said, Andrew?
Yeah, the sort of the pavers that allow the little plugs of grass to grow in, which, you know, the grass never really exactly thrives in Somerville, but it at least allows it to be more permeable.
Okay.
I'll be quiet now.
Any other comments?
Were you going to pull up earlier drawings or give us more explanation? I thought we were waiting for that.
Yes, sorry. Oh, boy. Where is that? Oh, I know it. Sorry, my system is slowing down here. Okay. No, that's not it. There we go. So this was the colored elevation presented the last time we met. And I think some of the comments we heard was in terms of materiality, you know, selecting a railing, being consistent with it, establishing some connection of this brick base so that it holds together a little bit more. So that's where we've included another pier here to express the structure, and then also included a pier in this corner. This way that it's maybe not tied together horizontally, but it's repetitive and repeating. With the material change being the horizontal connector. So these are the piers I'm talking about that come out of the brick base and then the material change at the top.
Can't hear you, Frank.
So that,
Can't hear you, Frank.
sorry.
Frank's trying to talk, it looks like.
Oh,
Yeah, Frank, your mic's green on here, but we can't hear you.
Frank, can you call in to the phone? Yeah. Well, Frank is calling in. So you've changed, so the materials are basically the same as you submitted on that alternative, correct? I mean, it's hard to look at a black and white. Do you have color images here?
I don't have a color, a flat elevation of it in color. I'm sorry. I have the model,
Okay,
which is maybe the better way to look at it.
okay, okay. Yeah, I think, to Andrew's point, if there's not a dimension to put plants in, I think that step is still making the seating edge, or, I think it's still good to have that base that is proud of the facade. I think that's helpful, setting the facade back a little bit. I mean, it'd be better if it could be a planter, so I'm not, maybe there are ways to accomplish what Andrew's talking about, but I wouldn't abandon the base, because I think the base is really nice on this, with the sloping sidewalk, and it just grounds the building, gives setback and all that, which I think is really helpful. And other than that, I think this is not much different than we would expect from what we had seen before. So I think it's generally, I think it's still generally heading in the right direction.
And I agree with Deborah. I like the planter. I just want it to be big enough to grow plants.
I understand.
Andrew, could it be metal? Corten or something like that?
It can. It usually gets, for residential, it usually gets VE down below Corten, before low steel, and it ends up somewhere in aluminum. And on the sidewalk, it gets damaged.
Yeah. I meant sort of on top of the brick, maybe, but, to give, closer to a couple feet of soil, but. Yeah, I think the brick is I think it's a good solution for the street. Frank, are you connected now?
I think so. Can you guys hear me or no?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Yay!
Yep.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I apologize. Thank you, Deborah, for that great solution. No, I'm in agreement with, I think, the direction that you guys are pointing out and all of the things that you guys are saying. I think that it's moved along.
Okay.
If there's no other general feedback, I believe this one also was an option was chosen at the last meeting. So again, the votes would be if there are any priority design guidelines that you want to call out, and if not, or in addition to that, even if no, you would motion to find that the design guidelines have been met to your satisfaction. Unless one has not, then you would propose a solution.
Can we call out the 12-foot setback as being a guideline?
It's not a guideline, but we will definitely have to figure that out for compliance for site plan approval.
So essentially,
not officially a design guideline.
So essentially, we approve that the guidelines on this one have been met according to the zoning. And then our comments on terms of things that we would like to see go with the project to the next level. Is that correct?
That is correct. We record the votes that you all took, highlight the options that were chosen, but then also write out all of your guidance related to specific items.
Okay.
Yeah, then I motion that we approve, that it has met the guidelines. Did we already do it met the guidelines thing? In the
Yes.
last one? Huh?
I don't know whether we voted on it. Don't remember.
So if we did.
But I second.
Okay.
All right, Deborah moves that all of the design guidelines have been met to the UDC's satisfaction, seconded by Frank. Let's do a roll call vote. Frank?
Yes.
Deborah? And Andrew?
Yes.
And if there is no need to identify any priority design guidelines, that is all that is required.
Cool.
All right, so we will write up your recommendation and record all of the events that took place at these two meetings.
Okay,
The deadline for the recommendation is 45 days. We always hope to deliver it faster than that. And then after this, you're now able to move on to your second neighborhood meeting 14 days from today.
okay. Okay, well, thank you for your time. This has actually been enjoyable. It's
All right.
exciting. It's exciting to be working with this new zoning and the new process, and I know it's a learning curve, but it's exciting to be part of it. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you,
Thank you.
James. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And Charlotte's your case review person, I believe. Who's your planner? Sarah.
Sarah.
Okay. All right. We'll be in touch through Sarah also.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
That concludes our agenda items for tonight. If we have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn.
Sounds like seconded also. Let's do a roll call vote to adjourn. Frank?
Yes.
Deborah?
Yes.
Andrew?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Good night.